Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cloud Experts Unleashed. And today, I'm going to freak out a lot of people. We're going to talk about why you should not host with xByte Cloud. I know I'm going to freak out all of my coworkers, but I got Dakota Clum. He's our CTO here at xByte Cloud, and we're going to talk about our customers that are in the public cloud. So they're in Azure, they're in AWS, and they've asked us to manage it for them because that's what we do. And there are certain reasons why they chose not to be in a private cloud or someone like xByte Cloud. We're going to kind of go into those reasons to kind of give everybody else ideas. Okay, hey, at what point do you grow to a point where you need something like a public cloud, or what are the instances where that makes sense and that you shouldn't go with more of a private cloud or an on-prem environment? So Dakota, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
I know I scared a lot of our coworkers starting off with why you shouldn't go with us. But so we have a couple examples of our customers that we want to go to. And again, these are ones that they've come to us to manage their platforms. We'll kind of start with one of the ones, and we can't use their names. But this is a large Fintech company.
Yeah.
And they've come to us for really technical guidance, a lot of it. But can you go into some of the kind of the reasons why they reached out to us in the first place?
Yeah, I think this is one of the companies we partnered with have an Azure footprint. They're heavily integrated in the serverless components of Azure. Azure SQL, Kubernetes, and containerization. What they were really looking for is an organization or a partner like xByte who can help them manage that footprint, keep it secure, and scale it as they continue to grow their own business. So really being an Azure kind of advocate and even technical guidance, providing technical guidance and support on top of that. So.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you and I were talking in the pre-show. These guys, and this is gonna be a common thread for a lot of these companies, is that they need the scalability, like the scale on demand. They're also using specialized services within Azure. So can you go into a little bit about, I guess, both those topics? Like what are their needs for scaling, and kind of what are the microservices or the specialties within Azure that this fintech company uses?
Yeah, so I think, what microservices really provides is the ability for organizations to, deploy more rapidly, really. So if they need a specific function or a specific part of their architecture, let's say SQL, that needs the ability to scale and be geo-redundant and be, accessible at all times, and be able to serve thousands of requests, Azure SQL can, kind of scale that up and down on demand. The same goes for, like, let's say Azure Serverless or Azure Functions in this case. You could set thresholds where your application or Azure in the backend knows to automatically scale your app up and down based on the traffic that you're getting. So, really, microservices enable organizations to set their own thresholds and say, okay, this is my baseline. But what happens whenever, on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock, I hit that threshold and exceed it by 50%? Azure provides tooling and that ability to scale it seamlessly. So
Nice. And this is like a SaaS company, and all the SaaS companies, they need that scaling. That's kind of like what they're built on, is being able to kind of quickly scale up. And I think you said that these guys are running Kubernetes. Is that correct?
yeah, really multiple services, but yeah, that is one component of it. So
Okay. And then we have another SaaS organization we wanted to cover. These guys are in AWS, and kind of, can you give us a broad idea of, okay, again, the business case? Why did they come to someone to manage it for them?
yeah, I think it's kind of the same as the fintech we just spoke about. It's an organization that's really seeking guidance about their AWS footprint. They're scaling rapidly, and really need a resource that can jump into an environment and say, okay, this is where you need to invest. Here's where you could scale back. And here's some security improvements or even resiliency improvements you can make and throughout your architecture. I think with AWS, it kind of has the same story as Azure in regards to microservice capabilities. You get the SQL aspect, you have the serverless capabilities and the containerization capabilities, and a lot of that scaling is integrated seamlessly. So
Now, the downside of these public clouds we've talked about is the lock-in. So, and again, talking about the pre-show a little bit, when you and I were talking about this company, there are options for them to potentially not to go to more of a private cloud, because they didn't necessarily need the scaling, in some aspects, but they were just already in AWS. So when approached, they're like, oh no, we're already there. All of our coding is for AWS. It's a big lift for us to move that. Is that common also with Azure for people to get kind of locked into either environment?
yeah, it really depends on, well, it is common, and it also depends on how integrated is your application stack with the various microservices throughout these platforms. You could be leveraging Power BI and Azure Functions and be using, pipelines and DevOps or Azure DevOps repos that are directly connected to your Azure infrastructure. There's a lot of elements that you can add to your application stack that in a way do become a dependency and a considerable factor anytime you want to move somewhere else, even to AWS from Azure. So
Oh, interesting. So yeah, so it's, I mean, a lot of companies do that though. I mean, you're banking on a particular technology, be it, I mean, any of the guys out there. I mean, you're banking on even Windows, or you're banking on PHP or ColdFusion or ASP.NET. You're kind of you're in that architecture, and you're kind of making a gamble on that, and it's going to be a big lift to shift.
yes, for sure. Yeah.
And then so we have a SaaS CRM company, and this is interesting because it's smaller on web, but they really needed to scale their SQL. So can you kind of give a little bit about why that's the case? Why so much scaling on SQL?
Yeah, so I think in this case, it's their deployment is more of a shared model. And when they have a CRM type solution or a product that they're selling, each instance of that deployment, not only that does it need its own individual database, but it needs to reside on its own server. So there is a little bit of separation and just data segmentation that needs to happen for them to stay compliant with their own clients. But yes, it is a very SQL intensive application, SQL driven application.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, so for them, the business case of having a completely separate instance of SQL is driving them to go to one of these public clouds, because
Yeah.
again, instead of having a VM where you're having to run that, you can have one of these specialized microservices for their platform. I guess these guys were AWS.
Right. And each one of those can be sized individually and, have their own pricing considerations. But that's one of the benefits of an AWS type solution is you can scale those and spin those up on demand. So
I know these guys, they came to us. Not all the ones we talked about come to us for ColdFusion, but these guys, they are running some ColdFusion, and they're like, hey, we need the experts in ColdFusion. So they've
yep.
part of the reason they came to us in the specialization. And the last one we'll go into is interesting because these other ones were already in their platforms, and they came to us to help manage because their core competency is not infrastructure. In any of these cases, they're like, hey, look, we recognized early on we don't want to be doing that because our guys can focus more on the actual application, so they can have a team, an outsourced team, doing the infrastructure. So this is another very large retail company who they're right now they're on-prem. One of the few holdouts on-prem. I shouldn't say that because we get a lot of on-prem, but they're moving on-prem. They're going to be testing out AWS. So why now would they do something like that? Like because I mean, AWS, a lot of people have been moving for years. Why now decide to make the switch, or at least test the waters?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're in their particular case, they've really reached what they believe is a limitation with their SQL capabilities, especially on-prem. They do want to have more of a geo-redundant footprint for their SQL environments. So, I don't know the exact landscape of their existing on-prem environment, but that could be a single dependency in a single location. And I also know that their scaling, or their need to scale within SQL is also rising, right? So they're adding, continuing to add clients through their retail front, and they really just want to develop more confidence in their SQL aspect. So
It's interesting. We talk to people, different companies, and there's a curve. So companies, they go to cloud when they first start off, because they're so small, they can't afford their own infrastructure.
yeah,
And so they grow that, and then get to a point where like, okay, we're spending a lot on cloud. Let's move that on-prem. So
yeah,
they have that on-prem environment, and then they grow that on-prem environment. And this is a great example. And they got to a point where they're like, okay, this piece of it, we don't want to manage it anymore on-prem. We want to reallocate resources. So let's now move that to the cloud. So it's that curve, the cloud curve for companies, where when they make these different switches. And that's a great example of that, where they did that. They're on-prem, and they're like, hey, look, we've gotten too big for on-prem, and we want to now look at the cloud. It's not cost effective. And then we've seen companies who make the switch. They move to cloud, and they're like, this is way too expensive, because they were doing it just for a cost benefit. I think early on that was more the case, where people went to cloud for just cost savings, and they quickly realized, okay, it's not a pure cost savings. It can save you if you reallocate resources, stuff like that, but you're going to cloud because you want someone else to kind of take over for you and use their expertise, or you want specializations out there. So it's interesting to see that.
Yeah.
All right. We kind of went over a few of our customers that we manage right now, in public cloud, and people kind of don't know xByte Cloud for that, but we do a lot of that. Any other interesting tidbits you want to throw out there, Dakota?
I think when organizations are thinking about the public cloud and where they want their infrastructure to reside, one key component to always consider is going to be the support. Is what do you have available to your organization from a support perspective, both at the application layer and the infrastructure layer. With an Azure AWS type setup, the larger these deployments become, it may be necessary to partner with a third-party organization, whether it be on an MSP front or consulting front, or even look over, the broader support plans that an Azure AWS infrastructure provide as well. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dakota, for joining us today as we go on this journey. And tongue in cheek, as we like to say, is why not host at xByte Cloud? So it's a fun journey. Someone will pull out that sound bite, one of our competitors, and just use that one piece of it. But anyway, it was fun talking to you today about this. And if you're out there and if you want to know more about how we can host your application in the public cloud, check out xbytecloud.com and schedule a consultation request. So thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day.
thanks, everyone.